Welcome, everyone, to the Beauty and the Surgeon podcast. I'm Amy. I'm a nutritional therapy counselor, and I am here with Dr. Jason Martin. He's a board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon. Dr. Martin, how you doing?
Doing great.
I have exciting news.
What is it?
It is our 50th episode,
So we've done 50 of these.
and we're talking about longevity.
I know.
We're
So
hoping to be a longevity podcast.
Right. 50 is the new 30, right?
Yes.
So-
yes.
It's crazy. 50 episodes. We have had some awesome episodes. We've had some goofy ones too. And I think we have a good body of work
We
that
do.
we can look back on.
Well, you're a good plastic surgeon.
And
That's how you get that.
you're a great Amy.
Thank you.
It's hard to describe what you are.
Well, that's what
You're like
Chandra calls
everything
me.
to everything. All right.
Chandra actually told someone the other day that she didn't need their nutrition advice because she had an Amy and that they wouldn't understand what that meant, but it took care of everything.
All right, so today's episode we're super pumped about longevity. So longevity is a huge topic. It's all in the rage right now. If you follow anyone that biohacks or alternative medicine, this is what everyone's talking about. And there's so many different things we're going to go through. Today's episode, we're not going to, since it's our 50th episode, we're going to get granular. But we're not going to cover all of longevity.
No, this is like spy versus spy.
Yeah, right. So Amy and I have picked out our thing we want to highlight. We will have more episodes on longevity.
I mean, we could literally have thousands.
We could have a whole podcast on longevity.
Multiple hundreds
We
of
could get rid of
podcasts
Beauty and the
exist.
Surgeons to longevity and the surgeon. All right.
Longevity in the surgeon.
So very exciting today. We've all done our homework. There's going to be things we talk about here today that are confusing, and they're even confusing to us sometimes. So we're going to say words, compounds, biochemistry stuff that may be confusing. Please do not fall asleep. But I think this is worthwhile because what do we do in cosmetic surgery, Amy?
That's like the cocktail party question.
Right,
People ask me that all the time.
In most cases, we fix problems related to aging or pregnancy, right? I mean, we do children sometimes, and that's congenital problems, things they're born with. But in almost all cases, we fix things related to aging or pregnancy. But aging is probably more than 50% of our practice.
Yeah, and I mean, you could argue that pregnancy is kind of related to aging.
Right.
I mean, we stop the progression of these things.
So basically, I'm a surgeon who treats a disease known as aging
With no known cure.
with no known cure. So it's palliative, and that's what we say in medicine.
Yes.
We're not curing aging, we're just fixing the symptoms.
And it literally affects every person on this planet.
So everyone listening to this now can understand why I have a fascination with longevity, because my whole career has been based upon fixing the symptoms and components related to aging. Clearly, in the future, plastic surgeons may be, not having to do all these surgeries we do. They'll still have to do some surgeries, but it'll be different. Now, how far in the future is that, Amy?
At this point, it's quite a ways in the future.
According to Ben Greenfield, it's like tomorrow. You just got to go out and grab some grass out of the ground and put that in his Vitamix and does what, cold pools and
Does his cold plunge and
Yeah, exactly.
shoots up some testosterone and drinks green juice. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that like I said at the beginning, longevity can be talked about in a million different ways, and we've each just picked one to focus on today. But I mean, obviously, this is something that has impacted the human consciousness since time began.
So when I was researching this, Hippocrates in like 400 BC or whatever, I'm sure it was 4,000 BC. I don't know. I don't the time frame, but it was a long time ago, and he was Greek.
Some Greek old dude.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a Hippocratic Oath, right? That's why I was drawn to this little snippet from this paragraph I was reading. He talked about humans having internal heat, and over their life, the heat dissipates. And I thought that was a really touching way to put it.
Yeah.
And his recommendation was to live a happy and stable life built with activity. And it was like, is that any different than now? Like Hippocrates knew it before. You could trade loss of heat to, chronic low-grade inflammation, which is basically what aging is, and chronic insults from the environment and your behavior. And that's why we age. But it was like that thousands of years ago, and nothing's changed. Now, the difference is we're starting to understand the genetic component of aging. Now, the problem with understanding the genetic component, we don't really understand sometimes how the genes then work in this complex system known as our body.
Well, what you're talking about is how the genes are
Expressed, the genetics, the epigenetics, and all that stuff. It gets very, very difficult. I mean, I listen to multiple podcasts, and I'm a doctor who went through medical school, and I can understand all these words. And it was, a couple times I had to kind of rewind it, kind of listen to it again. So it is a very complex process, but in itself, innately, aging is a disease. It's a disease of humans. It's inevitable for all of us. You can never stop the aging process. But why do we age? And I'm not even saying philosophically speaking.
Right.
Like, what is the medical reason we age? What is the evolutionary benefit to us? Why do we age? Why do we die? So we're going to kind of tackle these questions, but most importantly, Amy and I are going to go back and forth with really cool topics that we picked out. All right, Amy, let's get started.
Well, before we start, let's each talk about what our topic's going to be.
Sure.
So that we kind of...
You go first.
So I'm actually going second, but my topic, I'm talking specifically about the impact of diet in one very specific way on longevity. That's all I'm going to give away because I don't want people to skip to the end.
And I'm talking about an enzymatic pathway that has some bearing on aging.
Yours sounds like a superhero. mTOR.
mTOR. And people listen to this podcast. Usually, we have a sub following of fitness people, and they all know mTOR in a way that helps with anabolism or protein synthesis and building muscle. But I'm talking about it in a different way, which is related to aging, which is related to diverting your body's energy to repairing it as opposed to building. So we'll get through that.
Before we get into the slides, if you're interested in seeing them, you can watch this podcast on YouTube at Jason Martin MD. And if you're listening, we'll do our best to describe them.
Right.
Here we go.
Life expectancy, Amy. So let's just go into the topic of why don't we live forever?
I mean, from my standpoint and what I understand about how the human body works, the reason we stop living is our body basically stops replicating. We
Right.
stop making, and the reason that happens is because our DNAs are capped with what's called telomeres. So you think of that as the little end cap on your shoelaces. And if that goes away, your shoelace starts to ravel. So every time you replicate your DNA, that telomere gets a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter, and a little bit shorter until finally it's gone. And when that goes away, you're probably going to die very soon after.
Right. So loss of telomeres is a big reason why we age. I mean, there's other reasons. We'll get to that. But that's one of the bigger reasons. So evolutionarily speaking, why do you think that we die? So wouldn't it... So,
I know that. I have an answer for that.
right. So it would make sense that if you're evolution and you're
Yep.
sitting on your front porch and you're like, I'm going to design these humans to do exactly what I want them to do, which is what?
Procreate.
Procreate. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you have them live for 300 years and procreate every year?
Yeah, well, you're getting older. Then that's
No, but why wouldn't you design a human or
to
select
never age.
to age, but age slowly and be vibrant and vital for hundreds of years as opposed to, just 30 years and then you live the rest of your life, which is really where we are now. So one of the reasons is, and there's all these different theories, we're not going to get into this stuff because it just go off on a tangent, but one of the reasons is, historically speaking, up until basically the mid-1900s, everyone died of infection or trauma. I mean, if you're a natural selection, you could select someone to live 400 years, but they would die from an axe wound,
Correct.
or they would get some strange infection.
Right, or they'd
Yeah.
be killed in battle.
Earmuffs for all
die
the people
during
that
childbirth.
hate all the people that hate vaccines, they would die from measles
Yep.
or something like that. So,
Global epidemic. Yeah.
and so up until this point, up into the last century, people died all the time at a young age. But now that's starting to change. You see that 70 to 80% of people live into old age and die of old age. And only 5% now die of trauma, and the 10% I think is cancers and things like that. Whatever the case is, majority of people live into their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And that's across the world. And you can actually see, if you look on our YouTube channel, it shows different regions. And it was up until like the early 1900s, everything was stagnant, right? And then all of a sudden, life expectancy went from like 35 years to 40-year-ish level up to 60, 70, and 80 years old. So maybe the equation's changing a little bit. And so now we're in this part, and if you look at medicine in general, just medicine as a whole, now before we were treating traumas and infections and all that kind of stuff. Now we're treating aging. So actually, longevity is not just for the cosmetic surgeon and the Amy wanting to add on more things for people that want to be vibrant and have a better life. Longevity is actually an answer for a global epidemic of aging, which is going to consume our medical practices, our medical business everywhere. It's going to cost crap loads of money to treat all these people that are going to get older and older because less people are dying from trauma. There's more education. There's more economic stability in the world in comparison to 300 years ago.
Well, and there are more things that can extend life that is perhaps not quality life.
Right.
And I think that's something that we should bring up in the longevity discussion is no one wants to live forever on a ventilator in a wheelchair. That's not like that. Can we as medicine make a person live artificially longer? Yes. Is that the way somebody wants to live?
Right.
No one wants that life. So there's a difference between extending a person's lifespan and extending a person's healthy lifespan.
So quality of life and how functional your life is a lot different than just
being alive.
Talking about evolution and procreating.
Right. Is your heart still beating? Are you alive? Yes. Are you living a life? Are you living a quality life?
There was a theory, it's called disposable soma theory, and it talks about there's two different approaches to life. You can grow really fast, get a lot of muscle real quick, and procreate a lot. So what does that remind you of? A rabbit or mice?
Even dogs. I mean, you think they're fertile by the time they're 6 months old.
Or you grow real slow. You can be big, but you grow real slow, and you only have one offspring.
Turtle.
A whale. Right?
Yeah.
And they live forever, right? So that's the theory. So are you going to be the vibrant, muscly, fast, procreating being? Are you going to do the slow thing, right? And that's, what are humans? I mean, we're kind of caught in the middle of that, right? We don't have tons of offspring. I mean, in the old days we did, but these days we don't. We're slow growing in comparison to rats and dogs and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a human baby is extremely slow to mature.
But there are animals that live very long. There's a green, it's like a green shark that lives to 150 years. The turtles
turtles live hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years old.
Yes. We don't even know how old some of the oldest turtles are.
Yep. So
whales are a good example.
Whales live a long time.
Yeah.
So we're kind of stuck in the middle. And that's what it's all about. Longevity is not just for podcasts and for people trying to spice up your life and take crazy things that really aren't scientifically proven. Longevity is a global crisis, meaning the lack of longevity, and related to disease and disease of aging that's going to consume our medical systems and cost us trillions and trillions of dollars. So there is a whole grander scheme of this, which I'm sure governments and countries are working on right now because they see it coming. Mm-hmm. And the flip side of that is, too, if everyone lives longer, how do you have resources and how do you make sure people are getting quality foods and just structures for them to live in and things like that. So it's a very complex thing that we're not going to get into now, but we've already set the stage for everyone. All right. Amy, you talked about it. The reasons that we do age are multifactorial, right? So you said the telomere is a big part of that, right?
Well, you asked specifically why we die.
Yeah,
and that to me is,
right.
I mean, ultimately, unfortunately, that's when you run out of telomeres, you're not long for this world.
Right. Genomic instability. Why do our genes get unstable?
There could be for a lot of reasons. I mean, SNPs in our genes, through a variety of reasons can cause our genes to become unstable. There are actually a lot of things that can do that. Diet can do that. Environmental factors. I mean, it's...
So if you start to think about why these things occur, it's really alarming.
It is. And most of these, we used to think that our genetic code was written in stone, and now we know that it's not.
It is not the Ten Commandments.
No.
It's not Moses coming down off the mountain. I mean, these things are changing all the time. We have trillions of cells in our body, and they're always dividing, and the DNA is always getting replicated. You know what is one of the worst things for DNA? Sunlight. So every time you go out and get a tan, you're just like bombarding your system.
Photo damage,
which then leads to problems, in the genetic code or the DNA of our body. Stem cell exhaustion. It goes down, some massive amount of percentage every decade in life would go up.
And I used to have that statistic. Actually, I remember talking to you about it when I found that they can actually pinpoint again. I feel like I'm like the morbid one over here. Like when you get down to a certain amount of stem cells, that actually basically indicates that you're going to die.
Okay.
Of old age.
That sounds like urban myth.
No, This
right.
can be tested because they can test how many stem cells you
I
have.
want the journal article.
Yeah, I'll show it to you. This is from real science. Like you can actually pinpoint when a
Okay, so
person's...
if you could go into Dr. Martin's office and get your stem cell count, and you're gonna, would you do that? Would you do that?
It's the same thing with telomeres. I mean, you can
It's
have
like Huntington's disease, the same thing.
Yeah.
You kind of almost know exactly when you're gonna
exactly.
die.
You can
Yeah.
have your telomerase essentially tested. Now that doesn't always exactly correlate because we don't really fully understand telomerase, but it does give you an idea of like if you have a relatively low amount of telomere length at a young age in your 40s, like you may need to do some things lifestyle wise to try and extend those telomeres. I mean, you're not going to make them grow longer, but to preserve them as long as possible. Stem cells, this is not the type of stem cell that you could inject into something and you just have more of them. Like this is the amount of stem cells that you have. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't, I mean, on a side point for telomeres, mammals or humans don't really do a good job of reproducing those telomeres, right?
Oh, you cannot. They've not found a way to do that, and that's why I say you can't actually regrow a telomere in a human. There's been no way to do that. Taking exogenous telomerase, they thought that would be like, oh, this is it. We figured out like people are gonna live forever, and like it doesn't work that way.
Well, what if you grow the telomeres on a cancer cell? I mean, that's a problem too, right?
Exactly. If you extend, like,
Yeah,
so if
that's
you,
what I'm talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you extend the life, they're gonna proliferate forever,
Right.
and that's
so it'd be terrible for cancer.
and
Yeah.
cancer cells are kind of like zombie cells anyway that
Yeah.
don't really die.
Yeah.
They don't have those autophagy effects as much as normal cells. So like they already kind of don't die. And then if you're giving them tons of telomerase to like extend their telomere length, like you can't kill it. Like you're making something that can't die.
Right. Cellular senescence, which is more along the line, is that as cells get older, they start to get less productive and just like people, they start to be, slow down and become inefficient. And then at some point they become dysfunctional, just like people too.
Body destroys them.
Yeah. And those things over time can build up if your body can't get rid of it and create this low grade inflammatory state, which then feeds back to the genetic code. And then you get all these other problems. Mitochondrial dysfunction is a huge cause of why people, when we get older and you see an older person, that they don't have energy, they seem like they're slowing down. It's really, the mitochondria is the energy producing organelle in our cells, and that's where the ATP comes from.
Yep.
Right?
ATP comes from mitochondria.
Right, and the ATP production, which is our fuel, does not work as well as we get older. Mitochondria tend to lose their efficacy in terms of creating ATP, and then you lose energy and you have all the problems with old age.
Yeah. Well, and your body also cellularly, from a cellular signaling standpoint, doesn't get the message as much as you age. So even if your body's putting out enough ATP, like your cells may not be accepting it. You might not have the right cofactors to absorb it, to actually process it. So a lot of things can happen as we age and damage our bodies and our cells. Like it's the same thing hormonally. Like you might have enough estrogen or testosterone, but your body's kind of not picking it up, or it's not detoxing it effectively. You don't have enough glutathione. You're not getting rid of the old stuff. So it's blocking the new stuff from getting in. Like a lot of things can kind of start to happen with the internal functioning of cells.
Right. Deregulated nutrient sensing, and I think that's more related to what we're going to talk about today, which is your ability of your body to recognize that you have energy and what to do with it. So nutrient sensing is not, when I think of nutrients, I think it's like vitamins and things like that. It's really more related to, the compounds that are needed for energy production, and you tend to not work with those as well. Loss of proteostasis, which is, a lot of diseases are based on this. You can look at Alzheimer's has amyloid plaques. You get these abnormal proteins, and proteostasis is like kind of a maintenance of the proteins and their structure. Amy's favorite topic, okay, if you ever want to go for a full-on snooze fest, call Amy and talk to her about epigenetics. And that is where I think a lot of this is going, because everyone listening to this probably knows that there's DNA, which is our basic blueprint, which is like the blueprint of our bodies. But DNA is not what they show, Watson and Crick showed a long time ago, which is just a double helix that is straight. It has a three-dimensional structure that's not just the helix. It wraps around on itself and forms these superstructures. And those superstructures is really related to the epigenetics. And that's where we are now, trying to figure this stuff out. Every time you damage your DNA, it has to take that superstructure apart and fix the DNA, right? So it splits all the DNA and fixes everything, right? Because we're always doing this. This is happening trillions of times. And then it puts it back together. Every time it puts it back together, sometimes it doesn't put it back together correctly in terms of a three-dimensional shape. And that's where you get these epigenetic problems, which are devastating, that can pass on through generations and things like that.
Yeah, epigenetic effects can be seen multiple generations. I mean, and their effects may not be seen.
What's the cats you always talk about?
Prodinger's cats.
Google that.
It's a really interesting study. Not terribly ethical by today's standards, but it's interesting, and it shows they did it in cats because cats, as we talked about, replicate very quickly. Like, they reproduce at a very fast rate. So to do this, and that's what the discussions you and I get into about nutrition. Like, why aren't there long-term double-blind studies on nutrition? Well, because they're impossible to do. They're unethical and they're impossible. And to study someone, even as their own person, doesn't.
So what about what do they call them? Nutritional wards or diet wards, where they put people in the hospital for 30 days and just control everything?
Yeah, like metabolic
wards.
Yeah, metabolic wards. And they used to. And that's the thing. If you read some of these nutrition studies from the 50s, they would actually do them on prisoners or on mental patients, which is, again, not ethical. And also, it doesn't really test what happens to that person in the long run, unless you study them from the day they're born to the day they die. And
right.
you monitor every single thing that goes in and out of their mouth. And then you also look at what their offspring do or don't do. And what was interesting with Prodinger's cats was that what they did to the certain line of cats through diet alone, primarily, actually ended up making cats that were infertile. Like, after 3 generations, they could no longer reproduce. But that was reversible in cats as well. So they could get back up to normal population, normal reproducing after a certain amount of time. And that's what has, there is no way to study that in humans at this point.
Right.
Because we do die.
Right.
So, the fact that, and I love when people are like, oh, well, my grandpa smoked every day of his life and, ate bacon 8 times a day and did all these things. I'm like, well, that's great. And that probably had an effect on why you're struggling with this health problem now.
Yeah.
Yes, he lived to 110 and was smoking when he died. That doesn't mean that he passed on the greatest of genes to you.
Especially if he was smoking during the passing on part.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, all those things, that's part of our epigenetic expression. The genes of the past, the things we're doing to our bodies now, but then that is what's going on to your offspring.
If you look at this in totality, right? So we have all these insults going on in our body affecting our DNA, and then the expression of that DNA can get affected. Mm-hmm. Our ability to metabolize and make energy can get affected. Our ability for us to control the basic level of stuff in our bodies, like proteins. And then on a grander scale, how that affects us on a full body perspective is why it's basically what is occurring with aging. So that seems really easy, right? So now we just answered aging. So we kind of have an idea why it's occurring. So why can't we just solve this problem?
Because it's not just a problem. It's all these problems working synergistically together to create
hundreds and thousands and millions of things working all at once. And what people have done historically, which is great, is that you focus on things you can control, which is like diet and exercise. And then what they did, like in the 80s, they would focus on antioxidants. We're going to stop all the free radicals and all this damage that's going to occur. It did nothing. So now where we are is we're trying to figure out the components in aging, from a biochemistry standpoint, usually enzymatic pathways, proteins that have an effect on the body, trying to figure out those and then give them, either replicate those or whatever the end product of these pathways are, is give that to the person. And then hopefully what's going to happen is we can stop the damage, and in a better case scenario is repair the damage and take you back to where you were before. Amy and I talked about it. You're not going to stop the current. We have nothing now that's going to take you back. Mm-hmm. We have nothing now that's going to even slow it down a lot, but you can slow it down some above and beyond just living a healthy lifestyle, which not just includes nutrition, and doesn't just include not smoking and drinking. It also includes sleep. I need to work on that. There's so many different things.
Yeah, and I think what we can do, at least in theory at this point, is to increase the health in your years, not the years in your years.
See, I would like to increase the years in my years, but you do realize that we're probably in the wrong century for that. Mm-hmm. And, it's terrible to say this because then that would destroy, pop the bubble that all the people on the podcast say that we're doing all these amazing things. I mean, it's crazy. It's a wild west right now what people are doing.
It is.
But so let's talk about some of the things, and you can tell me why they're crazy. Okay? Because the medical side, the nutritional side is great because you're focusing on things that we know, right? Whereas the medical side is trying to use like medications and, all these kind of things to affect our body.
Right. They're treating the symptoms of the disease.
Yeah. Enzymatic pathways of aging. So, Amy, there's something called the kinase triad. You know this better than I do. Mm-hmm. So it's AMPK, sirtuins, and mTOR. So you can Google all these and you can read to your heart's content. So Amy, AMPK.
It's my favorite.
Okay, is your faves?
It is. Well, because it's doing good stuff.
Okay. And then the sirtuins, which is like really hip right now and hot. And then mTOR, which I'm going to talk about today. So that kind of kinase triad, what does AMPK do? I think I have another slide on this.
I don't want to jump all over your slides. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what we got coming up.
Just real quick on this. AMPK is really amplified in starvation mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have, and then,
It's telling your body to do stuff.
okay.
Yeah.
So all these things are sensing metabolism, sensing your fed state, your energy state, and affecting it. So is it better to have AMPK elevated for longevity purposes? And I know this gets complex. Or is it worse for longevity? I think it's better, right? Because AMPK will be more stimulated in times of starvation.
Mm-hmm.
And then what it'll do is inhibit the thing I'm going to talk about today, which is mTOR. And it will also activate ULK.
ULK1.
Right. Which then leads into autophagy, or as people on the internet are saying, which drives me crazy, autophagy.
Who says that?
I don't know. I mean, it's like these, you know how it's like the fakey fakes, fitness people.
Yeah.
So it's autophagy. The overriding thing of all this stuff is these enzymes, these enzymatic pathways are affected by your nutritional state. So then, Amy, we're getting into something that is really hip right now. What is that? You may talk about this, but fasting, right? Mm-hmm. So why is fasting good on an enzymatic level?
Because it gives your body a chance to focus on cleanup, essentially. So the theory goes that if you are fasting, your body's not working on digestion. Digestion is a very energy intense process, especially if you're consuming a lot of protein. Your body has to break that down. It has to turn it into things. It has to be usable. All of that takes work. It takes blood. It takes a lot of effort for your body to digest food and to make it into something usable like muscles and cells. So if you stop that, you stop eating, so your body doesn't have to do anything with digestion. Your digestion can rest. And now it can get to work cleaning up the cells.
And so what is autophagy? I mean, most people listening probably know this, but what is it technically?
It's basically a process of like cleanup inside a cell. So it's a little bundle. It comes from the lysosomes, which are kind of the digestive enzymes in a cell. Like it builds this little thing that goes in and kind of cleans up bits and pieces and weird random things and like cells that aren't really doing their job.
Gets rid of them.
Yeah, it cleans them up, breaks them down,
so it's like
recycles them.
Spring cleaning, right? So like spring comes around, you could take a day and you just devote your time to cleaning and organizing. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in a non-fed state and you're in starvation mode, AMPK, your faves, says, you know what? It's time for us to clean house.
We're not doing anything else.
Right. So we don't have to worry about excess energy, which mTOR would take care of. And what does mTOR do? mTOR
You asked me this. I'm like, in what way?
I know. Well, one of the main things mTOR does is help with anabolism or protein
Yes.
synthesis. So if you want to take this energy and add it on as muscle, which is what we do with excess energy besides just fat, it actually does for lipid synthesis and for lipid membrane. So AMPK is like, we're kind of starved here. We're really going to focus on cleaning house. And that, from an evolutionary standpoint, makes sense. In these times of stress, you would focus on cleaning house and making your body more efficient so you could survive that stress.
Yeah, and it's not even cleaning stuff like to get rid of it. It's also about like recycling. Like what can we break down and clean up and use? Because there's obviously usable parts, right? Same thing like when you're cleaning your house, you find something you didn't know you needed. Like, oh, great, I don't need to buy this. I have 6 boxes of trash bags. I don't need to buy trash bags. So it also helps your body recycle and use the things that it has and get rid of the things that it doesn't need.
In that sense, why don't we just energy starve ourselves all the time? If longevity is benefited from energy starvation, right? Or as everyone may have heard, we have mice studies showing that if you go down to your 20% or 30% of your daily caloric retirement, your BMR or whatever caloric equation you use, that you live 20 to 30% longer. I mean, what kind of quality of life would that be?
It's not that they go down to eating only 20%, it's that they reduce it by 20%. So they're eating 80%
Oh,
of the
okay.
calories they need. Yeah.
I thought it was they go down to 20 to 30% of their net. No.
Not in the studies I've read, but
Okay,
there's
well, I
a
mean,
lot of studies on it.
You hear people going down to 800 calories. You would assume they're,
That's
20, 30%. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, so why, if it's so beneficial for us to be in an energy starved state, then why don't we just do that for longevity?
Well, I guess my question is, why would we do that for longevity? Because of a mouse study?
Oh, you devious person, you.
Like, why would we do that?
So this
That sounds terrible.
And I tried to lead you in that. You went there already
Oh.
quickly. That was so good.
Sorry.
So no, I mean, so most of these studies are on mice. We know the AMPK is in humans. We've tested these things. We've done assays. We've known ULK or ULK, as Amy said, is there,
ULK1.
and mTOR, but we don't totally. We have a good idea, but we're not completely there. And mice, and then most of these things are studied in yeast, nematodes, mice, and then dogs, and then humans.
And some primates.
And there's not a lot of clinical studies because the stuff's crazy to go in there and try to manipulate this stuff because it can have really disastrous consequences. But this basic idea that energy starvation is why intermittent fasting is exactly why they say with intermittent fasting that you get autophagy. Or this cleaning of the house. And that's what the benefit of intermittent fasting is, one of the benefits, because there's a lot of other ones. But that's, think about that in the future when Amy starts talking, is that if there are a plan that you want to live long, that you might want to bring fasting into your nutritional plan. Maybe not every day, but...
Yeah, and that's where, when you and I talked about it, you asked me how I felt about what's commonly referred to as intermittent fasting, which is where you fast every single day for a set amount of time. My recommendation was perhaps instead that you should devote, 1 day a month to fasting for 24 to 36 hours instead, because if that's really your goal and you really want to just get as much activation as you possibly can and as much house cleaning done, that's potentially a better way to do it without having the negative side effects of being in a starved state.
Because we know that we talked about all the reasons for aging, and a lot of that is through damage. If you take a day just to help clean up that damage, you're going to be better off for the future.
Yeah. Because something that we didn't bring up, if you're suppressing a lot of these functions in your body and you're starving it of things that it needs, a lot of other things are going to start to suffer because your body's going to lesser the priority of those.
Right.
Like
and I'm
hormone
going to
production.
get to that
Okay.
with mTOR. That's a good point. AMPK, one of the ways to stimulate that without starvation is metformin, which is glucophage. We're not totally sure how it works, but obviously it stimulates AMPK, and that it limits the liver from making glucose, which is gluconeogenesis. So if you're a diabetic and a type 2 diabetic, taking a medication that limits the liver's ability to make your blood sugar go up, plasma blood sugar go up, then obviously that's a benefit. But the secondary benefit is that's been shown to stimulate AMPK, and then obviously it would have a longevity effect. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of side effects of metformin. At the same time, I find it hard to believe that someone who has a normal blood sugar level would take metformin, but maybe this is kind of the precipice of what's going to come in the future.
And there is a natural supplement that actually in clinical studies mimics a lot of the effects.
Don't tell me. Curcumin?
Nope. That's coming up.
Turmeric?
Nope.
What is
Also known, it's called berberine.
Oh, berberine. Okay.
Or Oregon,
I knew
Oregon
berberine.
grape.
Oregon grape.
Oregon grape. And the one issue that you can have with it, which is interesting, like using it nutritionally, the reason that we don't use it for just everybody, right? Because same thing, like, well, who doesn't want to just constantly normalize their blood sugars all the time? Well, what can happen is it can actually have an effect on the gut. It can start to kind of kill off some of the healthy bacteria in the gut if you're taking a lot of berberine, and it can also cause some blood sugar crashing.
Right.
So it's, everything in moderation.
Oh, just getting into this when you start realizing with the microbiome and what that does to these supplements,
There's more,
jeez, it just gets way too complicated. Sirtuins, which is the real big thing right now, which is sirtuins are actually found across all eukaryotes, or it's like yeasts and plants and mammals, and they are pathways. And humans, apparently we have 7. I think yeast have 3 or 4. It doesn't matter. They are pathways for us to fix a lot of the problems related to damage, and they are activated in stressed states. If you have vegetables like colored vegetables, those are in part colored through this activation of stress. That's why grapes get colored. This kind of coloring process of the vegetable then secondarily creates the stressful situation that causes it to be colored, creates it turns on these pathways. And one of them is resveratrol. Did I spell that right? Yeah, resveratrol. Yeah,
resveratrol.
And that's in wine. Historically, they've always said wine is really high in antioxidants. It's actually not high in antioxidants. It's high in resveratrol, which stimulates sirtuin pathways, which helps fix some of the damage that's been done over time.
Yeah, specifically, it kind of helps, and I don't think this is fully known why, but it can help keep your heart a little healthier because it keeps your blood vessels a little bit softer.
Yep.
Keeps them from getting hard.
And resveratrol for the sirtuin pathway, and you can buy that. I take it. Is like the pedal it's like pressing the pedal for the gas, so it increases the speed of the engine. And the other thing that's more like the fuel is NAD. Now NAD is like, that's Elysium or Elysium, all these kind of companies now that you'll see on the internet, they're selling it. NAD is a component that's involved in almost all of metabolism. If you actually go study biochemistry, and I highly advise you not to, but if you do, you will see NAD is involved in everything. It carries a hydrogen ion, and it helps with energy production, ATP, anything that occurs with metabolism and functioning of the body. NAD is involved, and the idea is that NAD is the fuel to help this get done, and over time you have less NAD as you age. So if you can get NAD or nicotinic or NR or NMN, I forget the full names of it, but like if you get all these supplements in there that you're going to be giving the body fuel, you give it resveratrol, and that's pressing the pedal and the gas, and you're going to be able to start slowing aging and theoretically maybe reversing it. I'm not sure about that. I listened to a whole podcast with, who's your guy?
Chris Masterjohn.
Chris Masterjohn. That guy's way too smart. And
oh my gosh! And like you said, just rolls off. I'm like, how are all these words coming out of his head?
Well, that's what he does all the time.
I know,
he's just
but
talking
they just
about
flow.
If you take NAD orally or NMN or NR, it goes to nicotinamide in the liver, and then that's what everything goes into in the blood, and then it reforms as NAD in the cell, and then someone asked him, like, why don't you inject it in the blood? When that doesn't work. And then it's like dependent on the microbiome, and it's just so complicated. But NAD is where this stuff is heading for sirtuins. There's been shown, at least in animal models, there's been a benefit. They're selling it now to humans. You can get the supplement somewhere. So NAD, NMN, NR. And the last one is mTOR. mTOR is a mammalian target of rapamycin. Rapamycin was actually came out when I was in training on transplant surgery. It was primarily used for kidney transplants.
Yeah, to stop the body from attacking. It's
It's
immunomodulator.
Yeah, exactly. And what it does is it limits the T cells, which are the
fighters. They're the fighter cells.
Yeah, we talked about T cells
Yes.
before when we talked about ALCL. That's a great episode on implant complications. But it limits the T cells from progressing to full maturity, and therefore you don't fight a transplant, right? Your body doesn't fight it.
Suppressing the troops.
So mTOR, Amy. There's two types, complex 1 and complex 2. Complex 1 is related to anabolism. Complex 2 is more in cellular control. And rapamycin or rapamycin, the drug rapamycin is directed toward complex 1. Okay.
Yep.
So mTOR, when stimulated, does what? It takes extra energy and puts it into pathways of construction. Like you'll make protein, you'll do things that are positive for the body because you have energy and you want to build stuff.
Yep.
In a simple way, right? That's the way to put it.
I think that's a really simple way to put it.
All right. And when mTOR is not turned on, it's like a light switch. It's not like halfway on, halfway on. It's either on or off. Then we talked about before, other things occur like autophagy and cleaning house.
Yep.
Right?
Resting, digesting, all those other things. Yeah, and mTOR is stimulated by activity. It's stimulated by eating. Insulin has a stimulative effect on mTOR.
In the fitness world, they want to stimulate mTOR, right?
Yeah, because mTOR is going to stimulate MPS, which is what we all want.
Right.
We want our muscle protein synthesis.
So in the longevity world, it's demonized in some way.
In certain forms of longevity.
Right.
Yeah.
And to this point is who was it I was listening to? Atia. He has The Drive is his podcast, really good. He takes rapamycin. He takes an immunomodulator drug, a low dose. He doesn't take the full dose on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. And my question to that was, how do you monitor that effect on your body? There's really no way to test what that's doing to you.
I'm sure he does. I mean, he's a very intelligent guy, very successful physician, does longevity.
Right.
So I'm sure he has ways. I'm sure he does a lot of analysis on himself, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's not like he has a large test group to pull from to understand what these lab markers that he's drawing even mean.
Right.
It's that's an interesting jump.
So the overall feeling of this is that the body wants to use its energy for either building or cleaning a house. Mm-hmm. And the idea of longevity is you want to clean house more and do less building. That's what energy restriction is, or fasting, right? So you're not going to put proteins in your body, and proteins are a big stimulator of mTOR. You're going to not put anything in your body, and you're going to starve, and that leads to these ancient pathways that were put there for us to survive. Clean house, make your body more efficient. When your body's more efficient and you clean everything up, you won't have the problems with aging. That's the idea. But then I struggle with this because isn't there a big part of aging with losing muscle mass?
Sarcopenia. It's huge.
So why would you want to treat one of the bigger factors that allows us to put muscle on and to age, like you're saying, functionally?
Yes, to have a functional aging.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's where the longevity thing, it's like nutrition. There's no one solution that's the one thing. Like you asked, like, why can't we just fix this? It's because it's not just one thing that's happening. And everything has a consequence in the body. It's like traditional Eastern medicine talks a lot about like making each breath count, because their theory is you only have a certain amount of breaths in your life.
Here you go. What is your problem? You started with the telomeres, right? Yes. When the telomeres are done, you're dead.
You're dead.
Then you moved on to the stem cells. So you only have a certain amount of stem cells. You're dead.
You're going to die.
And now we're talking about the breaths.
Hold your breath.
What's next?
Well, no, just about like putting that like quality in everything you do in your life. So if you're starving and losing muscle all the time, like, is that really quality? If you go all in on just blocking mTOR because excess energy uses up excess, it'd be like thinking that's my point with this, is that thinking in Eastern medicine, like, okay, so what if you exercise, you're taking a lot of breaths, you're shortening your life. Now, is that true? No. Like, that's not true. If you exercise, you're probably going to live a longer, healthy life. So the same thing, like if you stop your body from building muscle, are you going to age really well?
I mean, I have seen people in their 70s and 80s who have muscle mass and exercise, and they look great.
They look amazing. They feel great.
To me, they're going to live a long time.
They have healthy hormones.
Like, according to the biochemical pathways, and some of these really intelligent people like Sinclair, or the geneticist from Harvard, they're like, he's like, I don't want to put too much protein in my body. I don't want to build too much muscle, right? And there's this idea that you're one of the two types, and we talked about that a little bit. Like, either the big, strong person that dies quick, or you're the lean, long, you're doing the long play on it. And I think you can have both. And this is kind of the idea of longevity, and these really intelligent people in these labs are trying to find the compound so you don't have to limit your protein. Like, you can just take a compound. What they're going to do is implant genetic SNPs into your body that get turned on by antibiotics. And so, like, if you have
or by a signaler, you inject a little protein signaler in there.
Well, whatever the stimulus. Antibiotics is easy because you can do, like, you can take an antibiotic
or an antacid,
and then it activates that gene, and then, like, so after an injury, or if your eyesight starts to change. And by the way, all these studies now are being done on humans and people with age-related diseases or diseases that don't have an answer, like blindness. Okay, so they're using these kind of ideas of cleaning house, these protein pathways, these enzymatic pathways, and they're treating diseases that really have no other treatment. And I think that's the end. I don't want to overstate mTOR, but I thought it was really interesting because we talked about many times on this program. We've had Paul Ravella on here, people that understand protein synthesis, that anabolism and putting protein in your body is extremely important. The way you do that is to eat protein, and it could be vegetable or animal protein, but whatever the case, you need amino acids, okay? And you have to fuel the system with amino acids to build it. You have to have energy too, which is calories. those are two things that the longevity people are telling us that it's killing us. So, or causing us to age faster, which technically is killing us faster. So I'm confounded as a physician who does cosmetic surgery. Do I tell people, do they exercise and put muscle on, or do you sit there and starve yourself and just try to go for the long play? I think the answer is in the middle. And I actually think, at least right now, if I was going to advise someone, again, I'm not a longevity specialist, but I would say just to kind of cycle between. Like you're saying, once a month, do maybe a fasting thing. Maybe take resveratrol and NAD or something. Find something that works for you. And then also doing an anabolic fed cycle and then a catabolic cycle, and then going back and forth. Because you don't want to lose the muscle. Sarcopenia is not a graceful way to age, and you definitely die sooner.
Yeah. Oh, and you live a very unpleasant end of life as well. You know, and I think the important thing too, like you said, mTOR is either off or on, and our bodies are constantly cycling through this. Always. Like it's not like you get one option or the other and that's it forever. Like it's always happening. Your body is always cycling between these different phases. When you eat, it starts digesting. It's like saying like, well, you're either digesting or not. Like, I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
But you're either eating or you're not. And like that.
Why is that? Why is it in science they do it too, but definitely nutrition, they always oversimplify everything. I mean. Oh,
I don't think they are. I think nutrition tends to be overcomplicated.
Okay. Well,
but
I totally agree with you. And I think that just shades of gray are probably better in this situation. I wouldn't advise taking rapamycin. Just FYI, rapamycin inhibits mTOR from working. So if you took
it, a prescription drug,
given to transplant patients.
Yes.
So these biohackers are crazy. I mean, I think I know a lot of stuff. I wouldn't take them. I wouldn't do most of these things.
Yeah.
But you know, most of them say they're trying on themselves first, and we'll see. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Keep podcasting so we can see what happens.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, go past 50.
All right, so that's done. So mTOR pathway. We're not advising people to stop eating protein because we're pro-protein on this podcast, but we do think that maybe things that inhibit the mTOR pathway, like non-fed states or fasting, would be good. Consider some. Oh, there's something else that activates or that inhibits mTOR besides rapamycin. Is there other supplements? I never asked you that question.
From a supplemental standpoint, nothing I know of.
So turmeric and curcumin does the ULK.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that causes autophagy.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of things, I mean, one thing we didn't talk about is how many other things other than fasting stimulate autophagy. Cryotherapy, sauna, detoxing. I mean, a lot of things will stimulate your body to clean house.
We just got an IR sauna in our office for recovery for people, and we're going to help them with autophagy while they're recovering from surgery.
Those things that cause stress on a cellular level are going to cue your body into like time to do some work.
Last thing I want to say, we talked about hormesis, right? That's how you say it. Is that correct, Amy?
Yes.
All right. So low level of stress is actually good intermittently. High levels of stress is bad. So a starvation state is a low stress state, right? But then people equate that, low level, that's saying stress, but like a low level of inflammation, like what you see with obesity, is not good. So
obesity is a high level of inflammation.
Right. So stress is in your life, is physically speaking, is actually good in some ways because it pushes you into these longevity pathways. Okay.
All right. So let's talk about mine. So I'm going to flip the script on you and say, eat more for longevity.
Oh my God.
Eat more.
I can't even hear this because my mTOR is just overactive and I'm going to die 10 years younger.
Oh, well,
my telomeres are going to be shorter.
Your insulin's going up
I have
too.
no more breaths.
Yeah.
Nils, I think I'm out of breaths.
Well, start holding it.
Go get the AED machine.
Start holding it now. So, interesting thought, right? So often with diets, and I love this, when people find out that I'm a nutritional therapy counselor, they immediately want to tell me about their ultra restrictive diet and look at me like I'm supposed to praise them for it.
Right. So every diet, let's think about every diet that's a fad right now. Keto, restrictive. Paleo, restrictive. Low carb, restrictive. What else?
Zero sugar, restrictive.
Zero sugar, restrictive.
Dukan diet. I mean,
What's
Atkins
the Dukan
diet.
What's the Dukan diet?
It's one that's more popular in England because that's what Princess Kate used before, Duchess Kate used before her wedding. You basically eat these like oat fiber biscuits most of the day and starve yourself. It's good. It's a good time.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
It sounds good for my mTOR.
Right?
Okay.
Your mTOR would love it.
All right.
I mean, but really anything. Like, or people just love telling me how like, well, I cut out all bread. And then they look at me like I'm supposed to be like, oh, good job. Like I stopped eating sugar. Like, oh, great. Like, good for you.
Joe Rogan cannot stop talking about how carbs are killing everyone. And I was like, you've had people on who give both arguments. like I get it. Like carbs and excess maybe aren't great, but they're a part of your nutritional plan. Like you have to have carbs. Like it, like you said all the time, and I do this too. I'm a culprit that people demonize foods, right? They demonize subsets of food, which is not helping at all.
No.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's where we are as a society. You know, people like feeling like good about their choices, you know? So when they follow one of these really restrictive diets, it allows them that ability to be like, I'm doing good. I am not eating. I'm starving. I'm activating autophagy constantly. But what am I talking about? So what food has actually now shown to increase longevity?
Curcumin.
Yeah, by default,
Turmeric.
but those are more herbs.
Some berry you were talking about from New Zealand.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Oh, this is yours. Oh no, this is
Yeah,
mine.
Yeah.
I think I skipped one. Nope. All right. Well, so we'll go with this one. So when we're talking about longevity, this specific study that's been ongoing went for 27 years. This one that was talking specifically about diet.
Is this the one that just came out?
Well, it's actually been over since 2017.
I mean, the one that was just in the news lately.
It's been in the news lately because it's finally been meta-analyzed for these 15 different lifestyle or diseases that are related specifically to nutrition. But
And I know you're gonna get into the study, but some of it was a little bit concerning to me.
well, I'm not getting into the study as much as
Okay,
I think because
all
I'm
right.
trying to keep this short and keep it just to one thing.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many podcasts we could have about this study specifically. But the two things that it's important to look at when you're talking about longevity, it's not just longevity. We're talking about NCD, like Nancy, Charlie, David, which are non-communicable diseases. So these are the things that, you know, it's not malaria, it's not genetic. Like these are things that you can't just like pick up, right? So diseases that are caused by our environment or our lifestyle choices. And then the DALYs, DALY, which are the disability adjusted life years. So it kind of broke down this study into these two categories, which is really cool because the disability adjusted life years is what we all really care about. We want to be healthy as long as possible. So what things can we do?
But my mTOR is telling me I just don't want any skeletal muscle.
That's right. You just want to live forever
I just want to sit in a dark room,
as a skeleton.
starve myself.
Yes.
Okay.
You're the sad mouse. So
You literally picked the exact opposite of me. That's
we did.
good.
So what is that thing that could increase your disease-free lifespan?
Well, if you're looking on YouTube, there's a whole cacophony of fruits and vegetables.
Yes, fruits and vegetables. So in this case, this is where less is not more. So restricting your intake, which is something that people frequently do specifically with fruit, but also with a lot of vegetables. People cut out all nightshades, demonize a lot of fruits and vegetables. Eating less of these has actually now proven through this very long, it's 195 countries, so it's all over the world. Your intake of fruits and vegetables directly correlates to your healthy lifespan, the amount you're intaking. So that is great news. I am telling you to eat more.
So okay, quickly on this study though, they accounted for the differences in education, I mean, there was everywhere. I mean,
It's across the world. And of course, with any nutrition study, as we kind of touched on earlier, there are absolutely limitations.
right, because we always know that epidemiology studies can be problematic.
They are. And these are, this is also self-reported. So it's not like these people they're not in a metabolic
Right.
ward.
Right, and that's another problem.
And you don't understand how these foods were prepared.
Right.
And that's something that the author does actually touch on that. And it has changed. I mean, this study went on for 27 years.
I mean, at the very least, the study is huge and it has tons
Yes.
and tons of participants, so the N is big. So that has some power to it. But the epidemiology, self-reported stuff in nutrition is just flatly terrible, but it's what we got.
It's
right?
the only thing we
Gotcha.
have at this moment.
Okay.
And something to consider is actually preparation styles, and that is something that the study actually does touch on, which I thought was really great that they brought that up. How someone is preparing whole grains 27 years ago in 1990, may be different than the way they're preparing it in 2017. And it's impossible to adjust for all of that. But that's why we take anything with any study, really. You have to do what's working for your body at the time and take this information in and see how that works with your body. I'm never going to tell someone to eat something that I think is quote unquote good for them if it doesn't respond well with their body. And that includes nightshades and certain types of fruit and vegetables. Absolutely.
Okay.
So if this is a great graph, and this is directly from the study, it breaks down here.
So I have a first problem with this study.
Okay.
I love salt.
Well,
Does that mean that my breaths are going to stop, my telomeres are going to dissipate, and then I'm going to die from salt overdose?
no. And so many of these things, and this is what's really important in nutrition, is a lot of these things work synergistically and in relation with each other. So diet high in sodium is number 1 on the list, but what we are looking at specifically today is number 3, diet low in fruit.
Right.
Actually shows up higher than number 5, which is diet low in vegetables. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that over the last 27 years, since 1990, when this study began, the low carb craze really took off. Atkins, South Beach, people cutting out fruit entirely because they're afraid of sugar and they're afraid of carbs. So that's something that on the course of this study, I'd be interested to see this exact data from the 27 years prior and see if these were the same things that were affecting people back then.
Right.
So what we're faced with now, and these two are really high on the list. And I think one thing that I really loved about this study, and like I said, I'll go into this in more detail later, but it does talk about things like processed meats versus just intake of red meat versus intake of highly processed meat. And that's an important thing to break out. Also things like diet low in calcium. And that's so meaningful to me as a nutritional therapist because calcium is a cofactor of so many other things. So taking supplemental calcium doesn't really do a lot in the diet if you're not getting it with vitamin D and other things that actually make it usable. So this is the one for overall mortality, and then this was our disease adjusted.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
So carbs are demonized, right?
By some people.
Yeah, I mean a lot of people, but a carb is a carb, biologically speaking, biochemically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But where people are getting their carbs, if it's sucrose or fructose, I mean, all these kind of things make a difference, right?
I believe they absolutely
Okay.
do.
So
I have a slide about that.
Okay, great. So and that's where the rubber hits the road in this whole kind of equation, or is it even more complex than that?
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say that it's not more complex than
Gotcha.
that. Because if you look at this, again, now this is adjusted for essentially your disease-free or your disability-free lifespan versus just your total lifespan. Look what comes up top now. It's no longer a diet high in sodium. It's a diet low in whole grains.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, Barb, my wife, cholesterol specialist before she did healthcare policy, what's the one thing she said you should eat? Viscous oats.
Whole grains, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, because there's actual
Which
studies
is oatmeal,
that,
by the way, for people
yeah.
that don't know what viscous oats is. It's like,
And do I think, like going back to your question, do I think there's a difference between someone eating like muesli or whole oat groats versus eating a Quaker instant oatmeal packet or Cheerios? Absolutely, I do think there's a difference there in the way that our body knows what to do with what that is.
okay.
So, and like I said, I'll kind of talk about that a little bit more.
And I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but it's so interesting. So all the people, the IFT, follow the macro kind of people that say
IFYM.
that say that a carb is a carb, and you can get your calorie count, track your macros, and you're done. You, in some ways, disagree with that a little bit.
I disagree with that. I think food sourcing makes a huge difference, and it's again depends on your goals.
Food selection.
Correct.
I mean
sourcing. I mean like the selection of the food, and I think that goes kind of back to the mTOR discussion. And what is it that you want? Do you want to live a healthy life or do you want to live a long life? And that food, it kind of comes down to the same thing. Like, do you want to look good on stage? And I think even now, a lot of, not everybody's body is going to respond differently to food. There may be people from their epigenetic standpoint who can get away with eating a lot of like kind of garbage food and still looking really good right now. How is that going to affect their offspring? Maybe they're going to, why is childhood diabetes on the rise? It has a lot to do with what their parents ate and what they're eating, but also what their parents were eating and how it taught their body what to do with food, or what to get out of food, essentially.
Okay.
So to me, those things have a very long lasting effect, even if the person, it's like the everyday smoker is going to think like, well, you can smoke every day and live. And then there's a person who lives with a smoker for a year and gets lung cancer. It's how our bodies are equipped to handle that toxic load. And I think that food can be a toxic load, absolutely, is going to be person dependent. There is bioindividuality in all of this. So
diet low in whole grains is a real problem. Diet high in sodium, we're going to skip that one. Diet low in fruits, diet low in nuts and seeds, diet low in vegetables. Those are like the top 5. So, I mean, what is that just telling you? Whole grains, fruits, vegetables. Whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and nuts.
Yep. Yeah. So diet longevity is a pretty interesting like emerging thing that people are truly looking at, like how what we eat affects how long we live. So with this study, specifically the author, of course, he's the guy who kind of broke down all the meta-analysis of all of these things, and they were only looking at these 15 things. And there's all these, things to get into with nutrition studies, who funded this, what were they looking for specifically, who has to gain from this information, all that kind of stuff is, of course, coming into play. However, looking at fruits and vegetables specifically, their studies showed that eating 7 servings of fruits and vegetables per day decreases the risk of dying from any cause by 42%. And that is across the globe. And this goes down incrementally, but when you get
So,
below...
7 servings.
Correct.
Okay, what is a serving?
Depends on what vegetable you're eating. Like,
Right.
I think a good example, so you saw me eating lunch rapidly before we started. What was it? It was
It's most vegetables.
a serving of cauliflower rice. It was a serving of broccoli. It was half...
See, now you're just like, now you're bragging a little bit.
I'm not. I'm counting. So it was all...
I had a protein bar.
well, you've been
full
in
of
surgery
salt.
all day. It actually has no sodium. The ones
I
that you have
know,
very
I'm
low
just
sodium.
joking. It doesn't matter. I don't have any breasts left, so it doesn't matter what I do anyway.
So you're fine. Yeah. Tomatoes. I also had a just greens smoothie at breakfast, which is literally just a handful of mixed greens, water, cucumber, and lemon juice. So it's not your typical green smoothie that's loaded with fruit. But so that I've already reached my 7 servings of fruits and vegetables today. A serving in most fruits is going to be either a cup or 1 piece of fruit, like 1 apple, 1 orange, like 14 strawberries, half a cup of blueberries to a cup of, half a cup to a cup of most berries.
So, I mean, think about that. I mean, that's a decent amount. I mean,
It's really not. It's not as much as you think, and that's kind of my
okay,
point.
so if most people at breakfast, okay, we're talking about fruits and vegetables, not the viscous oats. So most people at breakfast probably won't. They should, but they probably don't eat a fruit or a vegetable in most cases. So then you got lunch and dinner. So you got to have 3 or 4 if you're dividing it equally.
Well, my
And-
point being, my lunch had 4 servings of vegetables.
Right. So
It's not that much food volume
Okay.
in all cases. When you say that much, I mean, of course, if you're trying to get all 7 servings from like raw spinach, like that's going to be the world's biggest salad. Like you are going to have a hard time putting down 14 cups of spinach to
there's
get your
nothing
7
better than a huge
servings.
salad. I mean, I love huge salads with this
Yeah.
big bowl, and you just throw as many things in there as possible, and you just eat to your life's content.
So many veggies. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's pretty powerful. I mean, decreasing your risk of dying from any cause, like it has such a protective benefit, but that benefit goes down pretty rapidly as your servings of fruits and vegetables decreases. So
Yeah.
that's why my point is like eating more of these things. This is one of those times where you really want to emphasize this and I am an omnivore. I very much believe that people should be consuming meat if they feel ethically inclined, but absolutely the bulk of my diet is fruits and vegetables. It really is. And that's putting the emphasis on increasing your consumption of fruits and vegetables is a great thing to do, especially in a society of restriction. Like maybe think about what you could increase, add a cucumber to your lunch. It's, very calorie insufficient, like mild, like you're not going to get full from eating a cucumber.
Celery.
Yeah. Have some carrots, like things like that really, there's easy ways to increase your intake of fruits and vegetables, and they're delicious. Like these are amazing, delicious things. Like
I was eating carrot. I always eat carrots. I love carrots. And someone said to me, it was a family member, and they're like, "There's a lot of carbs in carrots," and
there aren't.
I was like,
And why would that be bad?
I know. We have to really kind of reprogram our society a little
Yeah,
bit.
and that's
you've
my-
helped me. So
That's my point, though, with fruit being so high on that list. I mean, in the last 27 years, what have we done? A lot of people have stopped eating fruit, and that's really not good for your healthy lifespan. So looking at the risks from the 2017 study, obviously our top 3 were too much salt, none of whole grains, and then none of fruits and vegetables. So we've kind of covered that. Here's the big one, and this is what you were getting at earlier. So what about sugar and carbs, right?
wow, that's a great. I mean, you got a sundae, you got a cheeseburger, and cookies and fries.
Donuts, soda. So there's a big difference between eating a whole food and eating a processed food. When you eat raspberries, yes, they have sugar. They also have a ton of fiber. They have like 8 grams of fiber per serving, and they have amazing phytonutrients in them, like these little tiny micronutrients that we absolutely need. That getting in isolation is not that powerful, as you talked about with your looking at things that affect enzyme pathways. Like taking these supplementally doesn't mean they're actually going to get anywhere. Our body needs to understand what's coming in to know what to do with it. So when you eat whole foods, there's enzymes in those. Fruits and vegetables have enzymes in them that help your body digest them. So your body knows what to do. It breaks them down the right way. It extrapolates from them the vitamins and nutrients it needs way more powerfully than taking that supplementally. So there's a big difference between sugar and carbs that are naturally found in fruits and vegetables than what you're getting in these processed foods. And what I call them is industrial foods. So foods of the Industrial Revolution. These are not things that can be produced without a factory involved.
So what about the ones that are kind of healthy but still produced, like protein bars and things like that? I mean,
What I have
even whey protein, so these things are all processed.
They are, and things are processed more minimally and more processed than others.
Gotcha.
So there's a big difference, and it's also what portion of your diet is this. Now, if you are eating industrial foods in favor of whole foods, it's probably not a good choice. Now, if you're eating a protein bar because you've had 3 surgeries in a row and you need food.
Let's see, we had a surgery, then a surgery, then a surgery.
Right.
And then a protein bar, and then a podcast.
What am I going to think is better?
Right.
Starving yourself or eating
I get it.
a protein bar? And that's where life is all about choices, and food is all, that's the thing with food. You can't stop eating it. You're going to die. Like, what do
But
you...
your mTOR is going to be really deactivated.
You're going to get like 30 days and then you're going to die.
Yeah.
So you can live a long time without food in relation to being without water, but at the end of the time, you're still going to die by not feeding yourself. So we make hundreds of choices about food every single day. Every single day, we are bombarded with food messaging from all over the place. And that's where people end up developing their own little internal set of like rules and what's good and what's bad and like don't eat this and don't eat that. But what you really should be looking at is, what does your diet look like overall? Are you getting in enough fruits and vegetables? Maybe think about that before you think about, oh my gosh, should I, eat that protein bar? Like, did I have any fruit today? Like,
Right.
Is there an apple around? Like, and a scoop of protein powder if you're looking to like decrease what you're eating that's processed. Or just look at it as, I know what I ate today. I had a green smoothie. I'm going to have a huge salad for dinner. Eating this protein bar is what my body needs at this moment to continue having like conscious thought and energy.
So, some of these things like keto and stuff are goal oriented, and that helps people. But I think that our goals are a little bit messed up right now as a society, especially in America.
Yeah, and if you look at the breakdown of this study is really interesting because it breaks down each individual kind of food group intake by country and then looks at what's kind of optimal overall, at least what they're extrapolating is optimal. And I don't agree with all of it, like anything else, you have to decide for yourself what's optimal for your body and your family, but there are cultures across the globe that sustain themselves on totally different food than what we have in our country. And even in looking back, more so to some of these countries 27 years ago had way less access to industrial foods than we have. And across the board, these things still come up as the theme, that increasing your intake of whole foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, decreasing sodium. Where is sodium going to be most prevalent? It's not in the Himalayan pink salt that you're putting on your food. It's in, potato chips. It's in packaged foods.
You making fun of my salt?
No, I'm saying that your salt is fine. Your salt is fine.
Thank you.
Your salt is good salt.
I got good salt.
You're the salt of the earth.
I think that some of this too is it's region specific. So they talk about the Okinawan diet, and so that's in Okinawa, Japan. Well, the Japanese people are a lot different than Americans genetically speaking. So there may be some things.
Taking nice slow breaths and not going to die soon from breathing too much.
Exactly. So those, if you take an Okinawan diet and apply it to someone else across the country, different place, it may not have as much of a benefit. May not be from a longevity standpoint.
Right.
So
and this is what I love. So when a culture is studied, makes such a huge impact on what the extrapolation of the data means. Looking back at the 7 countries study that Ansel Keys did, he was studying the Greek population after World War II. They were a decimated country. They had access to very little food. They'd been living in a way that was not the way that they would choose to live. And if you look at the interviews with people in that study, they were longing to eat other things that they just legitimately did not have access to. They're a tiny island, so same thing, like studying Okinawans at a certain point or in a certain area in these blue zones, like everything about what you're looking at when you study them is unique. And I think that this study will be the same way. Years from now, people will look at this and be like, oh my gosh, like, look at these idiots never eating fruit because they all thought it was bad. And because that's the moment that this study happened, at the height of the low carb craze.
low carb restricts you in some ways, which restricts your calories, if you believe in energy balance, that's
right.
the way it works.
And
but the problem is, and it kind of goes back to the evolutionary theory, do you want to have the now gain or do you want the long-term play? And I think you can have it both. I think you can do the nutritional diet with fruit and vegetables and stuff like that. You could do intermittent fasting or fasting once a month. You can take your resveratrol and your NAD. You can do all these different things and have a positive effect. But I do not think that severe restriction, especially of one food group, is healthy in the long run for you. And this diet, showed it. And this is pretty powerful in terms of the number of people that were involved.
Yeah, I mean, are there things I think you should completely cut out of your diet? Absolutely, I do.
So my Himalayan sea salt or whatever I can still use.
Yeah, that you should absolutely keep.
Good.
It's very high in good minerals.
All right. So where are we with longevity, Amy?
Well, from these two things, we're on different sides of the eating eating line.
Right.
Eat more fruit and veggies. Don't eat anything.
Kind of like mTOR against fruit and veggies, but that's not really, because mTOR is more of a protein stimulus. But I do want to make one point in the study you showed. Also, the animal protein, or just eating protein in general, was pretty low on the list, right, in terms of living life?
It was literally the last thing on the list.
So in that sense, people that say that if you eat red meat, and we're not getting into the whole vegan, non-vegan thing, I'm cool with anybody doing what they want, but if you eat red meat, it's not just going to kill you, right? So I just want to make that real clear.
You're far more likely to shorten your lifespan by not consuming enough fruits and vegetables or eating too much salt.
Great. So I talked to someone the other day, a physician, really respect him, very intelligent, and he was just espousing things from a Netflix documentary. It was just very difficult to talk to him, and I felt like it was very irrational, even though I respect him immensely, and I really respect his viewpoints on not eating red meat. So, all right, that's what we have. mTOR. We can all take rapamycin, or you can do what Amy wants you to do, which is eat fruit and vegetables. I'm going to take the rapamycin because she has told me that my telomere is about to end. I don't have any choice. I have to.
I'm telling you, stop breathing. That's the answer.
Okay, all right. My breaths are almost over. Amy's going to eat the fruit and vegetables. She's going to have a better time of it. We're a long way off, maybe 100 years. Who knows? But, maybe 25, 30 years. You never know. Maybe in our lifetime.
It could be.
There was a bet, and this is the last thing I'll say. There was a famous bet in the 70s about longevity. And an optimist, and I forget the two people involved. The optimist said that someone's born in the 70s is going to live to 150, and the pessimist said no, and they put a couple $1 million aside in some sort of bank account, and in 150 years from there, it's going to be $1 billion, and if someone's 150 years old, they can claim the award.
Any person on the planet that was born in the 1970s, can it be like 1979?
I was born in 73.
Yeah.
I'm going for the $1 billion.
Well,
I'm not going to eat rapamycin. I'm not going out in the sun. It's going to be in a cocoon.
well, you better start taking supplemental vitamin D because you're going to be deficient in that.
Oh, here we go.
There's going to be a lot of things that are going to go wrong.
She always is. Don't ever talk to her about any of this stuff. It's always an answer.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I know this was a long podcast, but longevity is long. And this was our 50th. So I feel like we deserved a little
50
bit.
is the new 30. We're going to live to 150.
Yes.
We're going for 150 episodes. So
Age
we'll do it on
over
my
beauty.
150th birthday.
Well, we're going to do it before then. All right. Well, if you do want to watch this video, you can find that on our YouTube channel. We're Jason Martin, MD. Also on Instagram at Beauty and the Surgeon Podcast and at Jason Martin, MD. And thank you so much.
And if you like this episode, go listen to our other episodes. We have some great episodes on plastic surgery, on fitness, on health, on our top 5 moments in 2018, which is my personal fave. So listen to everything, rank us, and rate us.
Thank you.
Thank you.